Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning into another episode. We are going to be coming at you with another furniture makeover this week. We are going to be making over this vintage blanket chest. We've had this in storage for a few years now. I think we picked it up for around $14 at the time at an auction. It's kind of just been getting pushed around to the back, and it's time we did something with it. So today we're going to be doing a somewhat of an industrial makeover to it. We're going to be giving it a fresh coat of paint with Fusion mineral paint, and we're going to be adding some industrial details to it. So make sure you stick around and see how this piece turns out. So as you can see, this piece needs a lot of work, a lot of years of buildup grime, and the finish itself was just kind of sloppily put on. You can see some runs, a lot of scratches, chips, and a broken hinge. Now I wanted to use the existing hinges, but this one was just constructed in a way that I couldn't fix it. But the piece had beautiful details, some nice dovetailing, and the wood itself was nice on the inside. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the existing hardware, and I am going to reuse this latch here. And next I'm going to work on removing the hinges. And these hinges were a real pain in the butt. The screws that were in there, they were really rusted over, so I had to work at them a lot. And now I'm going to kind of measure out for these new hinges. I had these in stock. They're just like newer steel hinges, but they are a little bit wider than the old hinges were, so I'm going to use my multi-tool and just kind of knock a little piece out so they fit in the same spot there. And then I'm going to do the same thing to this top. I'm going to measure out, and I'm going to knock that little bit out with the multi-tool. I'm going to just give the hardware a quick spray painting with some black spray paint to kind of match the casters that we're going to be putting on. So the steel casters that I'm going to be using are black. So I'm going to paint the hardware the same just to kind of tie it all together, and I think it'll really pop on the color we're going to use. And then I'm going to give it a quick scuff sanding. This had like a really shiny finish on it, so I'm just going to make sure it has a nice scuff sand so the paint has a nice surface to adhere to. And for this, I am using a 150 grit sanding disc. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure you're scuffing up all that kind of shiny, glossy area just to make sure your paint's going to adhere, pretty well. Next, I'm just going to use a damp cloth just to wipe off all that dust. And now I'm going to work on attaching the casters. So these are the wheels I'm going to use. These are, I've used these before on some projects. They're pretty nice quality at a good price. If you're interested, I'll leave the link below. I just got these off Amazon. But they have the locking mechanisms on it as well. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of measure out where my holes are going to be, and it kind of worked out nicely where this piece was on the bottom here, patched through that. And I'll show you the bolts I'm going to use for that in a minute. And then I'm going to pre-drill my holes. I'm going to use these little lag bolts. I think they technically call them hanger screws or hanger bolts, but they're basically like a lag bolt on one end, and then they have threads on the other end for, to put a nut and washer on. So I'm just gonna screw these into all my pre-drilled holes. And you just wanna make sure you set your height right, so that way when you put your wheel on, it's not up too high that your wheel hits when it's swiveling. So you wanna make sure you get that height right, but you wanna make sure that it's, you know, high enough that you can get a nut and a lock washer and a washer on. And I also just shot a couple screws down here just to give it a little extra hold, because this piece was only held on by a few old nails. These lag bolts do go down into that second piece of wood, but I just wanted to give it a little extra hold. And then I'm just going to start attaching the casters by using a washer and a lock washer and a nut. Now for the paint, I'm using 2 colors of fusion. I'm using bayberry and lichen. Now the main reason is we just had a little bit of each of these left, so I figured I'd just mix them together and get whatever color came out of it. And it kind of came out more on the lichen side, which is a little bit lighter, a little bit I think with grayer tones, but it turned out really nice. But a piece like this is great for using up, you know, any remnants of old paints you have like that. If you want it looking really, you know, kind of primitive and industrial, a piece like this is really nice to use up some of that old paint on. And now I did only do 1 coat on this entire thing because fusion has great coverage for the most part, especially on, you know, anything but white. White, you definitely need a few coats for most things, but on some of the other colors, especially if you're going to be kind of getting a more primitive or distressed look, you know, 1 coat is usually enough, and it covers really well. And now, as you can see here, the original hinges were a little bit thicker than the size of the new hinges. So with that existing space, it wasn't going to work out perfectly. So I realized I had to go back and kind of add a little bit of a shim back behind there to bring it out a little bit so that the lid would open and close properly. So I just cut a few little pieces of wood and tack it fast with my nailer. And then I'm going to mark out where my holes are going to be so I can pre-drill those. And I'm just going to paint over these just to kind of blend it all together, because that, you know, wood was obviously a lot lighter than the rest of it, so it was a stark contrast. And now it's time to distress. Now for this, I'm gonna go pretty heavy. I'm gonna just let the sander do the work, and I was hoping a lot of those colors would come through from underneath, and it actually turned out really beautifully because we had the kind of grayer green on top And then we had some reds, some whites, some browns showing through that. And I think it turned out really nice and actually better than I had expected it would. But I'm just taking a 150 grit sandpaper, again, my favorite. And I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of hit this whole thing and let it naturally distress how the sander's distressing it. And then I'm just gonna finish off the whole thing with a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and kind of hit the corners and soften it up a little bit. Next I'm going to use this beeswax, this Miss Mustard Seeds beeswax, and just kind of go over the whole thing. Now Fusion doesn't need any additional top coat, it has a built-in top coat, but the reason I'm doing this on this piece is to just kind of bring out some of the wood grains, make the color a little bit richer, and as you can see it's just kind of bringing out some of those distress marks a little bit and just kind of giving it a nice look. And for this, you don't want to use a whole lot. It's not like a regular furniture wax where you kind of want to buff a whole lot on. This, you just want to take a little tiny bit on the cloth and just rub it in and work it in. And then you go back over after a few minutes and just wipe off any excess. And now I'm going to attach the hinges. So here I'm going to mark out where my holes on the lid are going to be, and I'm going to pre-drill those. And I'm also going to give this hardware a little bit of a distressing, just so it's not, you know, looking so new and it's such a hard contrast to the rest of the piece. I'm just going to go ahead and get some of that metal showing through, and I'm going to do the same thing with the latch a little bit later. But I wanted the black to kind of tie in with the wheels, but I don't want it to be looking super new. I want it to look a little bit worn down to kind of match the rest of the piece. And then I'm just going to attach the hinges. And I'm also going to attach the latch. And now after I had this attached, I did just put this in the existing holes, but you can see here that the bottom piece is really crooked, and that kind of really threw my OCD off. So what I'm going to do is remove that, and I'm going to kind of move it to where it's a little more symmetrical and even, and I'm going to reattach it. And next I'm going to attach this chain to kind of keep the lid from opening too far. You may have seen me do this on a few pieces in the past. I did it on another chest that we had made over, but it's just a nice little touch. It kind of, you know, makes it from not overextending. And then I'm just going to finish the piece off here by doing the inside with the Howard feed-in wax. This has like a nice citrus smell to it, but it also, you know, richens up the grains and gives the wood a nice conditioning and just gives it a nice rich look. So just as a reminder, here's what it looked like before, and here's what it looks like after. And I know that not everybody likes the heavy distressed look, but I think it was definitely a fit for this piece. I think it just added a nice look to this piece, you know, with the whole industrial feel to it. You know, I think it turned out pretty great. So it has a little bit of an industrial feel, a little bit of a cottage feel, but you know, I think it turned out really nice. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'd love to see you stick around. And until next time, make sure you check out some of our other videos. We'll see you later.